Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for coming in. My name is Eytan Buchman, and we're ready to get started. We got a really nice crowd out here today, and I'm excited. I'm excited for a few reasons. First of all, this whole Future of Freight series that we're running is really an excuse for me to have some conversations and answer some questions that have been on my mind, and really just a pretense to get a bunch of people that have very interesting things to say about freight talking to us. And just from the response, both from last week's series or 2 weeks ago series, and from when we started advertising this, has really validated that there's a lot of people that are interested in these conversations. The other reason I'm really excited is that I'm back at the office, which is really, really great. This is the Freightos office, so welcome to our home. Today, we're going to dive deep into ocean carriers and innovation. And inevitably, when you start talking about logistics technology, you'll always have somebody bring up this analogy of a speedboat and an ocean liner and how it takes a long time to turn around ocean liners. And from what we've seen so far, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years, I don't think that analogy is particularly correct. We've seen some of the best innovation within the space coming from ocean liners. And that's what I wanted to touch on today. I really want to dive deep. And there's no better person to dive deep on that with than Dr. Ralf Belusa from Hapag Lloyd, the Chief Digital Officer. Hey, Ralph, welcome. You're ready to join now? So you're here?
Yes.
Hey, Ralph, how you doing?
Fine, wonderful. Thank you very much, Ethan. So now also my video should start.
We're excited. Drum roll, please.
You have to unlock the video mode, and then I'm also.
Oh, okay, let's see.
Okay, now I can start it. Now I'm here.
We're in.
Great.
Perfect. All right.
Good to see you, Ethan.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. Thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited about this.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm looking forward to it. Great colleagues here, great crowd here in the chat and also in the podcast. Wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think one of the most interesting things that I've ran into when we were still allowed to see people, I ran into you in Hamburg a couple of months ago, Ralph, and we just had a really good conversation. And the thing that stuck out to me the most is that you're not actually from a logistics background, right?
Right, that's correct. So I'm now 3 years at Hapag Lloyd, and before that, I was mostly in e-commerce, in B2C companies, also in marketing, but also in the automotive area, in the retail area, in the space technology. So in different industries. And so now it's at least it's shipping and logistics.
Yeah, it's such an interesting. I think a lot of times, the first time I was at TPM, I felt this, where you walk around, you speak to somebody. And it's almost like the military, where anytime you run into somebody, they'll say how long they've been serving for, right? They'll say my name is whatever, and I've been in the industry for 20 years. So it's a very interesting move, I think, from Hapag Lloyd's part to actually bring in some fresh blood from outside of the industry. Have you felt that that's been a smooth transition?
I think from my perspective, it's also, if you look at all the merger and acquisitions from the different backgrounds, from the different cultures and so on. So this is also a bit in the DNA of Hapag Lloyd, with USC and CP ships in the past, and also from other industries. I think that's more or less in the DNA. And also, I'm not the only one who's from different industries.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. So, again, Ralph, thank you so much for joining today. A quick technical note before we jump into the questions. We shared in the sign-up form a form for people to drop questions. That doesn't mean that you can't ask questions right now. So please feel free to use the Q&A box on Zoom, and Ralph and I will try to get to those as we keep on going through the conversation. We will be sending out a recording of the video afterwards, so if you have to jump off the call, we understand. I think that's pretty much basic. Everybody understands that happens with webinars anyway, but thank you for showing up for this. Just a quick word of, if you haven't really encountered Freightos particularly too much before, what Freightos does on a very high level, we really have two different companies, Freightos.com, which is a marketplace that connects freight forwarders and importers, usually small businesses, and Web Cargo that focuses on connecting carriers, typically airlines, to the logistics providers as well. And the reason I bring that up is not to talk about what we're doing, but really to show that I've spent a tremendous amount of time over the last 6-7 years just looking at logistics technology and how it interacts with different players across this entire space. And what's always stuck out for me the most, and I see this, I just interviewed somebody else for Freightos who is not in the logistics space, and they always kind of have to do this little mind bend when you talk about a freight company, and they say, oh, well, there's an ocean liner, and then there's a freight forwarder, and then there's the importer or exporter. And it's always a little bit of an explanation. And I think that's something that we're starting to see change a little bit, maybe a little bit more than before. And we'll get to that. We'll get to that soon in one of the later questions. But the first thing that I kind of want to point out is that you can learn so much about a company from a menu. Right? If you just go to a website and you look at what's up there, what does the company hold near and dear? What's important? And Hapag Lloyd has dedicated a lot of this real estate to a bunch of different applications. Right now it's broken out into a couple of separate applications, but there really are a lot of different things out there. And before we even talk about what those specific innovations are and what each feature functionality does, my first question, Ralph, would be, how do you actually keep innovation moving at a large organization? I know that it's hard, that analogy I mentioned before about ocean liners, but it can be really hard to shift gears. And I'm curious if you brought in any particular strategy that you feel like is relevant, whether you're an ocean liner or a freight company or a large importer, to really take an idea and push it out at scale.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question, and that's reflecting for the shipping and logistics industry, but also in the other industries, how we get innovation in large organization. And there are really structured frameworks, as we know that from other industries. We know that sometimes from working agile organizations or learning organizations. So first, I think it's important to have an agile working methodology like Scrum or Kanban, or having that kind of rhythms that you have a stand-up, you have a requirement definition, you have then a sprint planning, then you develop something, you include something, then you make demo days and then reviews. So the normal innovative and agile working methods, that's more or less some kind of the basic structure first for innovation. And if you have that set up, then you need to see how you can accelerate that, and also in the combination, because innovation could not start or is not one team, it's a team approach. You have to educate, train also other departments and other colleagues in the organization about these methodologies in sales, in customer service, in marketing, in product development, in IT, that this can connect to each other, and then you can accelerate also innovation. And the third big pillar is that we really need to focus on three different things. I always mention that: the core innovation, the incremental innovation, and the disruptive innovation. And sometimes we see a lot of disruptive innovation in the media, in the press, and so on. But do not forget your core innovation and your tiny incremental innovations in the company to make your CRM system more automated, more convenient, easier to use for the employees, for the customer. That are tiny steps within your CRM system. Also for new products towards the customer, for shipping, step by step, making the core business like quick quotes, like bookings, like the navigator, like free time, like shipping guarantee, always step by step improving that core business, the core innovation a step ahead. And that leads then also in large organization. If you have the right framework in that, then you can scale that among all regions, areas, countries, and departments.
That's so interesting. I think there's two things there. Obviously the process needs to be there. Everybody needs a process for it. You can't just approach this ragtag. And we feel that as much on a startup as I'm sure you can feel at an enterprise organization, because everyone has ideas. And if everybody just throws it somewhere, nothing really moves forward. I'm curious about the team perspective, because, we speak to a lot of innovation teams, and frankly, sometimes it feels like they're a silo, right? They sit in a room and they think, and maybe they have their office in a WeWork, so they feel cool, and they go off to their offsites and they do startup-y things, but they always struggle to kind of push that innovation across within the organization. Is there a particular method that you feel like really works well to bring innovation outside of that little silo and across an organization?
That's why I think the innovation and the team who drives the innovation must be within the organization and also be part of the organization, and also in the team size or in the team itself. We always have 40, 50, 60% are from shipping and logistics, because we are working in shipping and logistics. We want to improve and accelerate and grow shipping and logistics. And therefore, we could not separate that and say, okay, now we have the digital guys and the marketing superheroes there, because then it's not connected. And then it's more isolated. And that's why we put the teams here together with shipping and logistics, with 10, 50, 20 years of shipping knowledge, and try to educate and accelerate both parts, because sometimes the IT digital experts or marketing experts don't have the shipping knowledge, and vice versa. And that's why giving that open culture of, hey, come on, guys, you are both experts in your segment, and now try to get the best thing together. Sometimes that's a challenge, and also sometimes also hard for the colleagues and for the employees to learn, because they see so many new things. What's now Kanban, what's sprint, what's a retrospective, how to put our goals into, is it now an NVO or a BCO, or how we structure that, where do we want to focus, and that we need to get together, and then something great comes out of that.
And do you feel that, I think that that's an interesting framework of making sure that you mix both kind of the outsiders and the insiders. Do you feel that most of the innovation will come from that innovation team, or is it really more of a role of finding different pockets of innovation across the whole organization and then letting it kind of take flight?
I think I deeply think that's really from both sides, because there are some certain technologies, frameworks, or habits what sometimes in B2C works great, but also sometimes how customer reacts in shipping and logistics to certain features and functionalities, how this gets sometimes a bit different in a marketing perspective. Because if you do advertising or build a process like Amazon will do that in exactly the same way, it's the industry feels like, okay, the process must be this, and Amazon process would be that, and that sometimes doesn't fit to each other. So the customer needs sometimes 10 times more time to understand this new process, and that's why you need sometimes a step in between, and that's then a good way to go.
Have you ever found something that you were working on from an innovation perspective that seemed like a really good idea, and then as soon as it hits a customer, you're like, oh wait, that doesn't work in freight? Like, does that, I mean, do you manage to validate quickly before you reach that stage, or, have you ever hit that point?
So we regularly or often do exactly the same, these things, test it with the customer, try that out, if that's working like we expected, or is that sometimes different. And that's kind of that build, measure, learn framework, to build something, to measure that, to learn from that, and then to adapt that to the customer needs. But sometimes we really see that we thought, okay, that could be a good product, but that's sometimes we realize that the behavior is sometimes in the product a bit different. So the functionality is there, the customer is using that, but sometimes we anticipated the customer will do a certain step after that, and the customer is not doing it. So that we need to then learn from that and improve that, why the customer is not doing the second step, and then improving that, building that the customer is doing also the second step.
Yeah. I mean, it's so clear to, like, sometimes we'll build these things and we'll think, in our mind, it's so obvious. And when we launched our freight marketplace, we'd have users, for us, it was obvious. You search, you find the right price, you book it. And we found that users on average were searching 20, 25 times before they booked. And just like spending so much time on the research phase that we never thought it would come close to that. Because when I book a flight, or used to book flights before COVID, I would never spend 25 searches on it. So it's really an interesting process. And let's like keep on moving forward into what the byproduct of that validation is, and where you end up going. So Freightos the Freightos Group runs an annual survey where we kind of measure how long it takes to get freight quotes from the top 20 freight forwarders. And last year, I think partially in part due to Hapag Lloyd's activities, we decided that instead of only benchmarking top 20 freight forwarders, we'll see if the digital freight forwarders and the ocean liners are also kind of ready to play. And one of the things we were most surprised by is that the ocean liners just overwhelmingly just blew us out of the water, so to say, with instant quoting. So out of the 5 ocean liners that we tested for FCL, of course, Hapag Lloyd was one of them that was able to provide an instant quote. And I think that means that there's this shift towards providing better digital service online. But there's a lot of different things that need to get better in freight, right? And I think everybody recognizes that. So there's so many things that can be automated or can be made frictionless. How do you decide where to start?
That's a good question, because if you look into something, you have 1,000 places where you can start. I think automation has sometimes, or no, not sometimes, automation has always a first step where you need to start and dig into deeper that and think about it. Do you have, for example, the data in the process available? Do you have that available once a day, once an hour, every second in real time? If you have the data in real time, then you can more and more automate. Then in the next step, if you can automate, then you can use also artificial intelligence, some deep forest, some ADA boosting and so on, algorithms on that. So that's helping, but you have to do your homework. You could not start with ADA boosting and random forest AI if you don't have enough data or real-time data or near real-time data and the step before the automation before. And so I think that if we look in the products for our customers, you can see exactly from the data and from the customer feedback, because that's both. It's not all digital. We love to talk to each other, talk with the customer, talking with you, learning and sharing experience. And that in combination with the data, that leads to, okay, this we can automate, that we need to automate. And that's also like, is it core automation? Is it incremental innovation, or is it disruptive automation? That's also the same field here. And that we do exactly currently in that rhythm, in that 90 days or in some kind of sprint planning, also evaluate that in certain timeframes, in more or less shorter timeframes, to get quicker, to see, okay, this now we need to automate because that accelerates that by X, and that therefore we need the data, therefore we need this.
I think data is definitely a fundamental requirement at this point to do anything. One thing that I've kind of noticed over the past couple of years is that logistics is actually surprisingly technology oriented, right? There is a lot of internal technology at logistics companies, freight forwarders or carriers. They're all been using technology very, very heavily. One shift that I've kind of noticed in terms of technology usage patterns is that 20 years ago, technology was really a way for a business to work more efficiently, right? It was a way to reduce your costs. Instead of having somebody pick up the phone, maybe let somebody find something by email instead of needing to look up the information in paper documents or call somebody else up. And it was really a cost-saving measure. And I think that that's shifting a little bit towards more of a customer orientation perspective, right? Where we have all this data, we have all this information. Now, how do I make it accessible to a customer? Right? And there I would just ask, customers need so many things. Are there particular things that you feel like are more important that they really want? Is it about the booking? Is it about the shipment management, customs? Like, where do you even go?
I think that the first step is really the quality and also the ease of doing business. We are all customers in certain ways, and we want to have it easy, transparent, easy to understand, just getting always the help and the support if we don't understand certain steps. And we always want to have a good partner and good recommendations. What could be my next step to do business as easy as possible? And I think what you mentioned, it's more like, from my perspective, it's a bit both. Because you mentioned that sometimes, that's focusing on costs and efficiency, and on the other side, there's agile and that kind of stuff. And I think we need to get aware of that. There are two sides. There is one, the agile methodology, agile working, and also agile leads then also to agile leadership, to giving a vision, because agile, you don't know what's happening in agile in 3 weeks. So you need to get more the vision and the direction, and that's why you're working here with leadership and agile methods. The other thing is more like process-oriented and also cost efficiency, being process efficient, and that you are, and therefore you're working with management. So, and that's also the difference or the mixture between leadership and management. you need both. You could not play one, oh, I'm now the leader and everybody wants to become a leader. Then a lot of people are forgetting to manage. So you need to be both. You need to be a manager to make process efficiency, to get the process right, to get command control, to get it really running if it's running. And on the other side, you need the agile, the startup mentality, the leadership, the vision. And if you have that, and that's working probably great, then you move over to the process excellence, and then you execute. And that's these both ways, leadership and management. And so you can play both. You have to play both. And you could not say, okay, I'm only agile, and we are all now agile. That's only one part of it. You have to be.
That means that, right? Agile means you're going to win a sprint, but you're going to lose the marathon.
Exactly.
Not right.
And that's why all the large corporations, they see, okay, they have their business model, they have their process, they have a super great execution, they are super lean and super efficient in execution, but sometimes they lack the part of agile. But now everybody wants to become agile, but does that mean it's the process efficiency is not worth anymore? No, you have to play both, and the best one is to integrate both. You have to know when you need to be agile, and you have to know exactly when you execute and scale.
Right. Yeah, and both of those also, if you do them both correctly, they end up being a force amplifier for each other, right? Because as soon as you have that internal process efficiency on the smaller kind of management level, it frees up the resources so you can actually think long term. And then, you hit the next year where the long-term processes start to come to fruition. So yeah, I totally agree with that. I want to move on to the next question because it's actually the one that I'm most excited about. So this was a Gartner, quadrant that was put out a couple of weeks ago actually. And I think, one of the interesting appearances there was Maersk showing up. And this is, I forgot to put in the title, but it's the top global 3PLs. And Maersk suddenly popped up there. Now, I know the industry context is that that's not actually Maersk there, that's Damco, right? Damco's been there for a while, and that's just a kind of a shift in the name. But I think this is a really interesting and telling sign of kind of what might be coming, because there's no question about it that direct to consumer is something that's on top of minds. Ocean liners have obviously been selling directly to importers, very large importers, for decades now. And every once in a while, there's a startup that comes up and says, hey, I can connect carriers directly to the importers and we don't need freight forwarders. And it's something that's been in the room forever. And I'm curious from your take, kind of where you see this going, without, of course, alienating any of the freight forwarders that are on the call.
That's
so good luck.
I really have to say I love this question, because that's not a new question. I know, and I will always answer that a bit from my past experience from other industries. If you look, for example, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, in other industries like retail, e-commerce, and so on, other industries have had exactly the same situation with the middlemans, like the freight forwarders, and so on, the different kinds of new platforms rising. And in the end, it's always the same. If you are doing a good job and if you are a valuable partner for your customers, then you are in the game. That's as easy as it is. If you're doing a good job, have the right product, the right price, a good marketing, good salespeople, and approach your customer in the right way, even with some specialities, for example, or if you are more on the broader scale, it doesn't matter. If you are doing a good job, then you are in the game and can grow and be part in the supply chain. That's always the same.
Are there areas where you feel, 5 years out, a forwarder will have more opportunity to prove that they're doing a good job vis-a-vis a customer compared to an ocean liner? Like, do you feel that the kind of target audiences of each will split into different types of services?
I think if you look more in the direction of that multi-sided platform businesses, if you look also in the literature or in these kind of management books with a multi-sided platform business, or Industry 5.0, Industry 4.5, 6.0, these kind of, you have to find your, not everybody, for example, could play a platform game like Alibaba or Amazon. We could not have 50 million platforms. That's not working. But you have to be aware and find your sweet spot for your customers in the complete supply chain. And that's kind of the business. Where is your spot in the supply chain, and where have you the most impact and the best results for the customer in your supply chain? Some of them are more on the special parts or on the specialities. Some of them are more in the platform business. Some of them are more in the sea freight and so on. So this is some kind of a moving market. And if you understand the multi-sided platform businesses along the supply chain, then you know how to or where to place yourself and where to focus on, because otherwise you could not do the whole range, for example. That could be a great goal, but I'm not quite sure if you can ever. Because as we noted from the press a couple of weeks ago, with Jeff Bezos mentioned that for Amazon probably will die in a couple of years or a couple of more years, because still of the huge size, and you dominate so many places in e-commerce and so on. It's really hard to survive. It's
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I definitely share a very similar view on that matter, which is that really, as long as you're driving value, there's going to be a space for you. I think one of the best parts of global freight and global supply chains is that it's a really big market. So it's probably not a winner takes all. It's probably a winner takes the specific part of the market that they win with. And there's a lot of different types of markets that you can win with. I'm seeing a question come in live, and I think that's just pretty relevant to the question that just came up, which is, do you believe, this is coming in from Abhil Yasha, sorry if I'm butchering the pronunciation, says, in your opinion, when do you think that the margin compression will ease for freight forwarders? Do you think that that's something that will change in the near future?
I think in terms of this, it is as always in the markets, also with the pricing and that stuff. You need to have a good pricing. You need to have a good product. If you have the right quality and also that the customer valued that kind of quality, the customer will pay more and so on. That's a give and take. That's how the market works. So I don't see that there is any direction in that way. Mm-hmm. So that's more or less how we structure also our products and services in the future. And as we mentioned that before, what kind of benefits are we giving to our customers, doing or helping them to do business?
Awesome. And I think this is taking us back a little bit more towards the data side that you started by talking about. But we're definitely seeing, right, whether on the ocean freight specifically or really on a broader level, a big shift towards digital, right? That, TradeLens, DCSA definitely as standardization. But we're also seeing more APIs. We're seeing more activity taking place through digital channels. How important do you feel that data standards are? Do you think that there will be kind of one data standard that wins it all, and then that means total platform commoditization? Anyone can create a platform, right? Anyone can create a Travelocity or Priceline because there's so many airlines that are automated. So what do you feel like the role is going to be of data standards, and what will be the impact of full standardization on the industry?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I love it. So I think data standards are really important, but what we also need to consider is that in shipping and logistics, because of the long supply chains, because of the complexity, it's not done if you have one data standard. That will not manage everything. Because there are too many open ends where you have to manage that. And also on the other side, every partner in the supply chain needs to get aware of what kind of data standards or what kind of exchange methods he's working with, because I hear also a lot of, is it now blockchain? Is now everything working?
I just saw Sarah just literally said the word blockchain in a question. I'm looking at a question about where's the role of blockchain. I'm like, I knew someone's going to ask that. So, okay. Perfect.
Exactly. That's why I mentioned that, because the blockchain, there's always, is in the future, everything in the blockchain. And I will always say the same. We know that from the EDI, the electronic data inter-exchange between the systems. Since 25, 30 years is EDI one common standard in the industry, also in other industries. That's one part. Then we have the APIs for faster application programmable interface for connecting the data between. Then there are some data exchange formats like not EDI, not API. It's like messaging services like Kafka. If you have a huge amount of data, what you would like to exchange. And then you have the blockchain if you would like to exchange secure data. And now you see you have 4 different types of data inter-exchanges. And so every company needs to decide, is that now some data I need to be highly secured, or is it some kind of data, it's a huge block of data. You could not put the Kafka and the messaging data all on the blockchain because the blockchain that's not working in the blockchain.
Right.
You could not do so many security things. That's where it's too slow. And also the API, if you just want to have the short inter-exchange between different services, the API is the best version to have these kind of exchange methods. So that's why I think not everything will run into the blockchain. That's why also in other things, not everybody is going to swimming, not everybody is doing basketball or playing tennis. So there are different kinds, and we need to know what kind of data we need. And so the standards are more or less important in that way, that on the different path we have the right data standards in place, but also more or less agile data standards, which get more and more frequent improved. So it's not like, okay, now we have a data standard and then nothing happens for 3 years.
Right.
That's not the world of today.
Yeah, I think this kind of survival of the fittest, like Darwinian standards, where as long as this is a useful standard for me, everybody's going to use it. Everybody's going to keep on using HTTP when you request a website, right? Because that's a good standard. SSL is a standard that's working, but there's no one standard that's going to live forever. And eventually they'll die. What I do think is impressive, and as a representative of an ocean liner, I will say thank you for this. I think that the fact that there is this broader adoption and this openness to, yes, we need to cooperate and at least try to come up with some basic standards. I think that as a whole is a net gain for the industry. So yeah, I'm definitely from a logistics solution provider side.
Exactly, and I also think that we need to start with that, and also again starting that simple approach, the easy approach, starting with something and then ramping up. I'm not a big fan of waiting 1.5 years to have then this list of data standard features, and then I say, this is not working, that I don't need, that I don't need, that I need, but that's not working. So it's better to do that step by step and start with that together, as we know that also from other industries. They have started, for example, in the healthcare industries, it's really, they started with 3 data fields and working with the hospitals and so on, if that's working with 3 data fields.
Right. All right. Well, so moving on, we have about 6 minutes left. So moving on to a more rapid fire kind of question response format. We got a couple of questions that we got in advance that I put in here. And then there's a couple more that are waiting. So shifting over to this, we seem to be seeing some stronger kind of controls around wrong shipper declaration while we're moving away from middlemen. Do you think there's this risk as it becomes easier and easier to kind of book shipments online, that there'll be a risk of having non-professional cargo owners? And how is that something that you control for?
I think there are a lot of proven mechanisms in place that this will not happen. And also on the other side, hopefully the business gets easier and easier in the future for all participants, because that's all we want, to have ease of doing business here.
Right. And I think that's the role of technology, is to actually try to identify, how can I make this as idiot proof as possible? Right. You have to assume that somebody's going to try to break it. How do you make sure that doesn't happen? My favorite question so far, I think somebody was answering their favorite toppings for pizza. Ralph, what do you like to put on your pizza?
That's wonderful. I like olives. That's really appreciated, and also in combination with an acoustic guitar, or because I love playing acoustic guitar, and that's a combination, olives and playing acoustic guitar. It's wonderful. And
a good beer right next to it.
Yeah,
I'm okay with it. How do you feel that? And this came up in another question about digitization. But how do you feel that large shipping lines can solve last mile, and particularly in emerging markets? But let's first focus on that bigger picture of the last mile in general.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an interesting question also in terms of digitalization, helping and supporting also all participants, as I mentioned before, in the supply chain with the right data at the right time and so on, that also a last mile delivery gets easier and easier for all participants in the supply chain. Because as always, couldn't be that one part is having all and it's becoming easier and easier, and for all other parts it's becoming more and more complicated. That's why I also mentioned in the organization, I want to have a good product for the employees and for the customers, because it doesn't help if it's super cool for the customers, but it's heavily complicated for the employees. So
right.
It needs to be both.
Yeah, and I also, just to add on that if it's super cool for the customers, but not great for the employees, that eventually means the employees are not going to support it the way you really need it. And that means it's going to go from being super cool for the customer to not working for the customer, and then it's not cool for anyone. Are you considering exposing Hapag Lloyd APIs directly to freight forwarders or to technology platforms?
I think that's also a good question. And as I mentioned before, with EDI, because we connected a lot of companies over EDI, also APIs, hopefully also in the future. And also blockchain. I think that's a way in the future, but it always depends on the partners, and that also our teams will evaluate with which partners and what kind of collaboration we are going into.
Okay, cool. This is actually a great question coming in from Max Sullivan. How do you focus what you personally can do as a leader, right? Like daily routines, I know this, allocating time to read, to educate yourself, working with employees, interviews with employees. How do you actually come up with enough time to think of your vision, right? Think of that long-term vision, but actually to get through your day? Like, do you have a particular process that you use?
That's a wonderful question. Normally, I read a lot. I listen also a lot to podcasts and that stuff, and I try to have some time for that. And you need some free time to think about that kind of stuff. Because if you're always working like a project and the next meeting and the next meeting and the next meeting, then you're more or less always in that execution mode. And sometimes you miss the bigger parts, like standing a bit behind. What's here missing? Is here agile missing? Or is here some kind of 90 days or whatever framework missing? Or what we need to improve in the next iteration? Or how we structure an iteration? For that, you need sometimes time. And that, from my point of view, that's then always also sometimes the big points you need to play, because otherwise you're always executing one project after another. You make one tick box after another. Okay, that's done. But have you won the game? No, not really, because you have only executed and finished your Excel list.
Right. Yeah, and then you just end up working for your calendar rather than working for the company. Which I think good point. Great. We're just about out of time. I'm so sorry to the people that we didn't get to the questions. Ralf, from your side, if there's one big takeaway, logistics technology, what's changing the industry going forward? Or let me scratch that actually. If you have advice for a logistics provider or somebody in the logistics space on staying relevant using technology, what would it be?
Thank you. So my thing is really, we can make really a difference in the industry. And that's why I stepped into the shipping and logistics industry, because there are so many opportunities and so huge opportunities in the whole organization. So not only in sales or customer service or IT or marketing or finance or human resources, in all different departments, you can have such a great and positive impact. That's my takeaway. You can step into everything and make it better for tomorrow for all of us, and that's a huge. I love it. It's a huge benefit.
Incredible. All right. Well, Ralf, thank you so much for your time. This was really interesting. Really, real pleasure to catch up on this. And thank you everybody, all the participants, for listening. I really enjoyed myself. We'll be doing another one of these in 2 weeks with a freight forwarder, a top 20 freight forwarder talking. But thanks again, Ralf, and thank you all participants. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you.